Sometimes your career takes a turn. Our guest today on Creative Innovators is the wonderful Chris Zyda. Chris is someone who I got to know back in grad school when we were young people, very young people, and he has a new book out called The Storm. And The Storm is really a biographical history of the life that was when he made an abrupt right turn and needed to find something other than going into a creative direction when he was dealing with his partner's health crisis and passing during the earlier stages of the AIDS epidemic. Please enjoy this journey story where Chris turned right and kept turning right and found a way to combine finance with creativity and storytelling, and made his way back after a stint with Disney and Amazon and eBay. He's like Zelig, and how someone who was deemed to be untrainable at an earlier stage in his career ended up creating not just a career at those major companies, bringing together finance and storytelling, but also, and learning on the job, but also how he then took a company public and then in the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, launched his own company where he's at the helm of now, helping do finance and storytelling for major family offices in Southern California. So please enjoy this story. I've enjoyed knowing Chris this whole journey, and think about from this, what happens if you turn right? What could you do differently that could be a different career, but maybe swing back and become a writer in your later stages of your journey? So I've been privileged to watch pieces of your life as they have come through mine. And so I'm really excited to have you on this show.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm very glad to have you on here because you have come full circle round to, and I actually have a copy of the book at hand here with The Storm, to your fairly new book. When did this come out?
It came out on December 8th.
December. So we're
just 3 weeks ago. Yes.
Yeah. We're recording this in December of 2020. So I'm really proud that you have done this book to tell pieces of your life story that are maybe similar and different than we're going to talk about today. What inspired you, English major back from UCLA in the 1980s, to swing back around to publish a very specific autobiography?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I have always kept in the very back of my mind that I might write something someday. And I originally thought I would get back to it when my career slowed down. My career never really has slowed down. And so my book is about my first partner who died of AIDS in 1991 and all the crazy things that went around that. But 20 years after he died, I wrote a very short story, 13-page journal entry almost, about what had happened in a very high-level manner around that time. And over the years, I mostly shared it with my family at first, and I shared it with a couple of friends over the years. And there were two people who kept telling me, you should write this into a book. It would be a great story. You should totally do this. And I really didn't want to at first. It took me a long time to come around to decide that would be the thing that I would write. But they kept at me, and finally, a couple of things aligned in my life, and I finally felt maybe I could try it. And certainly there's a lot of very painful and personal disclosures in this book that I was also afraid of writing and putting out in the public. So even when I started writing it, I didn't even think that I'd publish it at first. I just thought it would be interesting to see, could I remember what happened? Because it was 26 years earlier that it had all happened mostly. And I wasn't sure I could remember it. But I did my best, and that's ultimately what got me to start the process.
And how long ago did you start writing the book?
I started in September of 2017.
So this has been even a journey in the writing phase and the publishing phase.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing is I think that getting a publisher, getting an agent and getting a publisher took a lot longer than writing the book. I wrote the book in 6 months, And then it just took really a year and a half almost to get a publisher to give the go ahead, because, it's a tough subject, and memoirs are, are harder to find publishers for sometimes. And, but it turned out that the publisher, Rare Bird Books, that published my books, came along at the perfect time. And my book came out in the middle of the COVID-19 virus pandemic, when it's about the AIDS virus pandemic from the 1980s. So it ended up being a perfect timing for the book to come out.
But not necessarily a quieter time for you professionally, for your day job?
My real job is investing money for a number of very high net worth families and their foundations and their companies and all their various holdings. And that is quite a busy job. I mean, I generally work about 75 hours a week on that, and I founded my company about 13 years ago. And so,
wow, it's been that long.
It's been that long.
It was.
Yeah. This is the longest thing I've ever done in my life, work-wise, is this company, Mozaic. And so
it was birthed from another crisis.
Right. It started in the financial crisis of 2007-8. And I've grown it to be a wonderful company. We're managing billions of dollars for a number of high net worth families. And we do everything. We're basically the family's chief financial officers, and we handle anything financial that comes along in their life. So I was doing this, 75 hours a week in the day and on weekends. And then I had to carve out time to write my book at night and on weekends. So I had a pretty disciplined schedule that I set up and I stuck to, and I had a bunch of rules that I followed. And I wrote 2 nights a week. So Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7 to 10 p.m. I had to write. And then I had to take 1 day of each weekend to write 10 hours. And if it was a 3-day weekend, I had to do 2 10-hour days. And then every time I had an airline flight that was longer than 2 hours, my rule was that I had to write from the moment they let us use our laptops until we had to put them away for landing. And then when I was away on business trips, after my work day, I would write in my hotel room unless I had work to do. And when I put all of that together, and then I also had to write 10 pages, at least 10 pages per week, because I knew I had to have about 250 some odd pages for a book. And I really stuck to this plan. And after the first few chapters, I really got in the zone about it. And it was a really wonderful experience, although it was incredibly painful and cathartic at the same time.
So I'm going to back you up in life a bit here.
Okay.
When I think of you, I think of someone who is at his heart a creative, and at his heart persistent, detail-oriented, passionate about his work, and someone who wasn't planning to be a finance guru. When
That's
you
right.
were a small pup, what were you planning to actually be and do way before English major at UCLA? What was the Chris Zyda at 10 or 12 thinking he wanted to do when he grew up?
Well, when I was really young, I wasn't really thinking about anything other than being a doctor, which is what my parents constantly fed to me as I was growing up. They wanted a doctor. I'm the youngest of 3 children, and they wanted one of us to be a doctor. And my sister wasn't a doctor. My brother wasn't a doctor. And so I was their last chance. And so they really indoctrinated me to think about that. So I did have that at a very young age. But when I was about 15 years old, I went to my first Hollywood screening at the 20th Century Fox Studios, where I got to see the original Star Wars film in 1977. And the moment I saw that film, I knew I was going to work in Hollywood in some capacity.
Okay, how did you end up there? I mean, I was at one of the first day showings, but who got you in to see the screening?
So this girl from my junior high school, Karen, her father was a marketing executive at 20th Century Fox. And it was right around the time that the film came out. 20th Century Fox had a special screening on the lot. And she invited me and a few of our other friends from junior high. And we were in high school, or just going into high school at that point. And And so we all went down, and her dad drove us to the lot, and we went in the screening. I had no idea what a studio was or what it looked like. And we went in this very cushy studio, screening room, huge theater actually. And it was just incredible. It had an incredible sound system. The screen was huge. There were no commercials. It was just the best way to see a movie, and especially that film.
Oh yeah, totally. I think I was at the Cinerama Dome in Orange County, which is a gigantic screen of that my dad basically said we had to be there that day. That's one of my, I had a lot of our lives are circular. So I went back, I was actually George Lucas's banker when we came back full circle to doing the reissues. So this is not my story. This is a Chris Zyda story. So you were living where at the time?
Well, I grew up in Porter Ranch out in the San Fernando Valley. So we had lots of people in all my, elementary, junior high, and high school that were working in Hollywood in some fashion. Parents were working in Hollywood. Some of my classmates were actors and actresses. And so it was sort of all around me. And but really seeing Star Wars on the 20th Century Fox lot was the impetus for me to really think, okay, I want to work in Hollywood. And also age 15 and onward, I was increasingly realizing that I liked to write, that I was good at writing, then I was better than many other people. And I was editor of my junior high school newspaper, and I was editor of my high school newspaper. And so I had a lot of opportunities and creative outlets for writing. And then I did enter UCLA as a chemistry major because my parents really did want a doctor. But after the end of my freshman year, I switched to English literature, much to their dismay. The first of my big dismays for them.
Hey, Mom, Dad, I've already changed majors. And So English lit, you were thinking that you were going to become this phenomenal screenwriter, or that you were going to...
I wanted to write everything. I mean, I hadn't really honed it. I wrote movies as an undergraduate at UCLA. I wrote a play, a musical that got produced there. I wrote a lot of short stories. I thought about maybe I'd write a novel someday. I hadn't really fine-tuned it terribly much while I was in college. I just knew that writing was going to be a big part of my life. And little by little, as I went through college, I was just doing more and more writing. Became an English tutor. I was tutoring the people on their graduate school applications and tutoring the football team and the basketball team on composition. And I just did a lot of writing, and I took more and more classes outside of the English department in the theater arts department, which was difficult to do at UCLA in those days. If you weren't a theater major, they generally frowned on you taking their classes, taking up a spot. But I did anyway. And I just loved it. It was really a passion. It was a lot of fun. And then I set off to
go ahead.
And I set off to make it my career. And that's when life happened.
And this is where your book takes a deep dive into this whole time of your life and a lot of decisions in your life, including coming out, including healthcare, including decisions on how your work interplayed with your personal life because of financial need and security and fear. And so it depends on how somebody is in listening to this, whether they have any kind of scope and scale to understand the dynamics. Not wanting to tell someone the entire story that they should read your book about, but what were the decisions you were making personally at this point about what Chris Zyda was going to be when he grew up?
Well, I had pursued writing for a couple of years after I graduated in 1984. I had also fallen in love with my first partner, Stephen, and we were building our life together. And, writing is a risky profession. It's really difficult to break through. It requires a lot of time and attention. And I had a day job to help pay the bills, but I was writing at night.
What was the day job?
I worked for the UCLA administration. And so Stephen started to get sick in 1986. And this was in the days when AIDS tests barely existed. And if you took one, it'd go on your health record, and then your insurance company would use it to drop you. So there was a big fear about getting AIDS tests, and also they weren't quite accurate yet. and they didn't have anonymous AIDS tests then. So in this whole backdrop of Stephen getting sick, trying to figure out, how was I going to be a writer? If, Steve was going to get sick, we were going to have a lot of healthcare expenses. I also thought that I had AIDS too. I was pretty sure that I had it since we had, unsafe sex together. And so I made a really difficult decision in the summer and fall of 1986 to go get an MBA so that I could make more money and have a stable job with healthcare, and I'd have enough money to pay for Stephen's healthcare expenses for the rest of his life, and then someday my own. And that's ultimately what led me to business school. And
Which
then
is where we met.
That's where I met you, and where we worked on the Exchange, the newspaper together. And
I coerced you into taking over the editorship, like you really needed something else in your life at that point in time. And
I
then
know.
actually we performed together. You played the piano backup for me.
I know.
But that's a whole
for
nother
cabaret,
thing.
right?
So how long had you been playing piano underneath all of this stuff?
Oh, I started playing piano when I was 7, and I actually insisted to my parents. I came home from school and I said, I want to learn piano. There had been a piano in my kindergarten class, and the teacher had pasted the notes on top of each of the keys. And so you could sort of follow a really simple song and plunk out the melody. And I just loved it. And I even when I went into first grade, I would come back to my kindergarten class after school and I'd go try to play on the piano. And when I got into second grade, it just became a little bit uncool to be creeping back into kindergarten. So I just came home and said, I want to take piano lessons. And then my parents got me a teacher who I drove nuts because I didn't play all the notes on the music. I added extra ones if they sounded better, and she hated that. And after about a year of teaching me, she pronounced that I was unteachable and quit.
So the unteachable Chris Zyda was then all the way through his master's, but really needing to find security health insurance in some place that would be inspiring. And you tell this beautifully in your book, but how the heck did you end up at Disney in the Treasury Department?
It's the craziest thing. I mean, my life is really fascinating on a career level, because here I was in business school. I knew my partner had AIDS. I thought for sure I had it too. And I was just trying to get a job that I would make a good salary and pay for Stephen's healthcare. And but I found out when I got into business school that I was really good in the finance and statistics and economics and accounting that were a lot of trouble for other people. And so it was really easy for me. And I decided I wanted to work in the entertainment industry, even if I wasn't going to be a writer. I wanted to be in it in some fashion. And I set my sights on Disney because it was the best entertainment company at the time and still is. And I just put myself I bugged the heck out of this woman in the personnel division there every week.
Meet her.
I just called the studio and I just asked them to put me through to human resources. And she picked up the phone. Her name was Debbie, and she was really sweet, like as a typical Disney employee would be. And I just said, I'm looking for a summer internship there. And she said, well, we don't have anything right now, but you can kind of check back once a week because things change quickly around here. And I called her for months every week. And then finally, it was like the first week of May. Okay. And school is over in like the first week of June. And I didn't have a summer job. And she said, well, I have an internship in the consumer products division. It's in finance. If you can come in, I'll put your name on the top of the list and we'll get you an interview. And that ended up being how I got hired by Disney for the summer. No, I suicided on Disney. It's one of the most crazy rolls of the dice of my life, where I literally just decided I was going to work for Disney. And if it hadn't come through, I wouldn't have had a summer job. And then I probably would have had a very different life. But that summer job turned into my field study project for the following years. That's the master's project that we had to do to get our MBA. And so we did a field study project, and then Disney liked me so much that they said they were going to hire me when I graduated. So I didn't have to do recruiting in my second year, which was wonderful. And then, but they didn't know where they were putting me. And then at the end of sort of in May of May of 89. So right, a month before graduation, I went on an interview in the Treasury Department. I didn't even know what a Treasury Department was. And I got hired to be there. And half of my job was investing the company's money. And half of my job was doing investor relations, which is all the financial communications that a company does for Wall Street and shareholders and analysts and things like that.
And speeches for the
speeches.
CEO. I remember you're writing Michael Eisner's speeches for a while.
Right. I mean, and so it ended up being a great use of my English degree because I could write well. But on my first day at Disney, almost on my first day, I was really interfacing with the senior executives of the company and helping them write their speeches for Wall Street and telling them what they could and couldn't say because of disclosure issues, and working with the general counsel on what we could say publicly and what we weren't saying publicly. And at the same time, I was learning how to invest. I mean, on my first day at Disney, I was responsible on some level for almost $1 billion of investments. And this was just the craziest career transformation I could have ever imagined, because this is like 1989, I'm doing this. And then back in 1986, I was trying to be a writer, and all this, and all while Stephen was getting sicker and sicker.
I don't want to interrupt some of the core parts of your story, but also was in another crazy financial time. So 89 was the HLT crisis, if I remember correctly, that we were heading into financial challenges. We'd been through financial challenges, and it wasn't necessarily a smooth, easy time to hear Chris manage the cash balances for a major top corporation.
Right. I mean, Disney was growing gangbusters at the time. It was only really 4 or 5 years after Michael Eisner even joined the company. And so everything was growing by leaps and bounds. In 1987 was the big stock market crash in October. That was 20% decline in one day. That's still the biggest decline ever in history. And that shook up the markets. And then as we got into 1989 and 1990, that was the first financial crisis, which was mostly commercial real estate related, but it did drag the whole country into a recession. And that was the backdrop of getting hired into Disney and then getting pushed, put into this. Really, Treasury is about the best finance job that you could have in any company. And then to have it in a growth company like Disney was literally like winning the career lottery. And I'm enormously grateful and thankful for it. At the time it happened to me, I didn't even know what had really happened. All I knew is I had a lot of work to learn how to invest stocks and bonds and real estate and alternative investments, and to write all these speeches for all these very, very famous people that were running the company in different divisions, and to try to keep it all going together while my partner was home dying from AIDS. It was a really wild period of time for me.
So one of my favorite Chris Zyda elements is that you collect people, but you still know people that you've worked for through the years. And so I know that you still know people who you worked at UCLA with. You built a relationship with people across your time at Disney. What was it like to be at Disney during those days and to be a young professional trying to balance many lives at the same time?
Oh, the beginning of Disney, it was fun. I mean, I really loved what I was doing. I mean, it was a wonderful escape for me for a portion of each day to be at this incredible company where everybody was an A+ player. Even the executive assistants were really A+ people, and to be learning so much. And I also, a big part of my job interfaced with Wall Street. So I would be in New York and JP Morgan would be teaching me about how equities worked. And I'd be sitting on trading desks at PIMCO down in Newport Beach and learning about how bonds and everything got priced. And, but Disney was wonderful because we were sort of conquering the world then. It was probably one of the best eras to be working at Disney because we were building new theme parks. We were trying new types of entertainment. I mean, there were so many really great things that happened while I was there. And I did for a while, was able to balance it against, what was going on at home with Stephen's illness. And eventually there was a collision course that I was on because my job kept getting more and more demanding, and I was, kept getting more and more projects, and I was getting more and more worn down emotionally because of what was going on at home. And eventually I had to come out at Disney I was terrified when I did it, but it had a wonderful supportive environment for me after that. And everybody was incredible and helped me get through the last 6 months of Stephen's life, finally having everybody know everything that was going on in my life where I had been hiding so much of it before then.
So Disney was supportive for you through some really big transitions in your life. We talk a lot on this podcast about transitions, and mostly we talk about professional, not as much personal, though so many times they're so intertwined. Why leave Disney?
Well, I hadn't planned on it. My Disney was so wonderful to me, and after Stephen died in 1991, a couple of years later, my career was really rocketing there, and I was having so much fun. I got to work on pretty much every really high-profile project the company did between 93 to 1998 when I left. And really what happened was my dream was to get promoted into an operating finance role. You're going to laugh. And be transferred to Walt Disney World and live in Orlando, Florida. I really, really wanted that because I worked a lot with the people from Walt Disney World. They were all incredibly nice. They were all incredibly organized. I had to go to Disney World every 3 months for work. And I just always looked forward to going and having fun with them. And I made a ton of friends over there. And but our CFO wanted me to stay in investments and treasury because he thought I was more valuable in that position than if I'd gone into Disney World. So he wouldn't let me transfer. And I always sort of thought about it, but I realized I was going to be kind of I don't want to say the word stuck in treasury, but in treasury because, and the CFO, Richard, paid me really well. He treated me really well. The company did treat me really well. It's just that I didn't have the mobility that I ultimately wanted. And so one day, and he always said, I'll take care of you. Don't you worry. And then one day he quit. He went somewhere else. He went to another company. And I sort of woke up and I thought, well, if he's leaving, who's going to take care of me now? I don't know that anybody will. And there was a lot of transitions happening. We had a new treasurer that had come online and we were still getting to know him and how he worked. And I literally, because Richard quit and went to Starwood Hotels and Resorts, he'd resigned. He hadn't left yet, but he'd given his notice. I called my friend Susan, who introduced me to her headhunter, and I went on one interview at Amazon.com. And this was in April of 1998, when the company had just been public for barely a year. And after the end of that day, they hired me to be their first assistant treasurer. And so
far you've got two single eggs in single basket stories here, right?
Yes.
I'm going to go
one interview
on Disney. I'm going to do one interview and go to Amazon. And Amazon at the time was not a sure thing.
No, it was losing money hand over fist. I had bought a book from them because I wanted to see if the website worked. And I knew the internet was becoming a big thing by 1998. And I knew that there was going to be a big sector. And I knew Amazon had a chance to be successful. But I literally went on this one interview up in Seattle. They hired me the next, that was a Friday. They hired me. They made the offer on Monday. And then Disney countered and tried to keep me at Disney. And for a moment, I almost stayed at Disney. And then Amazon countered back and they doubled all my stock options, which was insane. And at that point, I knew I sort of had to go, because if Amazon became really successful, I was going to kick myself the rest of my life for having turned down the offer. And also their CFO, Joy, was just incredibly smart and wonderful. I really bonded with her on my interviews. And so it was really hard to leave Disney. I was very, very sad about it. I'd been there for basically 10 years, for the worst period of my life, and they had really stood by me. And but I owed it to myself to take this chance. And Amazon, when you say Amazon now, you think, well, that wasn't much of a chance. But in 1998, it was a big chance because it wasn't clear that they were ever going to sell more than books. It wasn't clear. They had a hard time raising money in the capital markets. The stock was, I think the stock when I interviewed there was like at $6 a share. I mean, it was a really tiny company. And And so, but I finally felt like after 10 years at Disney and I got my whole life back together about after Steven had died, it'd taken me a long time to rebuild it. And I thought, okay, well, I can take this chance that I can go there for 3 years. If it doesn't work out, I can do something different. And ultimately that's what led me to make that leap. And it was scary.
And you moved to beautiful Seattle.
Yes, we moved to Seattle. And Seattle is beautiful when the sun is out. And the thing about, I'm born and raised in Southern California. And so sun is very important to me. I didn't know how important sun was to me till I moved to Seattle. And I realized that, oh my God, I think I can maybe make it 3 winters here and then I have to leave. It's a really interesting city. And when the sun is out, I don't think there's a more beautiful city in the world. It's just that it only happens like 7 days a year. And it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me. And I think also the job I had was very, I was working 80 plus hours a week. There in the internet, there's no boundaries in personal and work life. And it was fun for a while because I was learning so much and I was teaching everybody so much, and we were conquering the world. I remember begging American Express to allow their cardholders to shop on the Amazon website in Germany because they didn't want to do it. And they didn't, this is the days when credit card companies didn't really trust the internet yet. And so there were a lot of really crazy fun experiences of it. But the weather in Seattle does not jibe with me for a long-term home.
Now, were you doing anything creative at this time? Were you writing? Were you doing, you went from being at a creative company to one that was creating in a whole different means, but you were being this sort of uber staff person bringing expertise in to a non-creative company after having been a creative company for so long.
That is a great question. So at Disney, I was able to do a lot of writing of speeches. So that was a creative outlet for me writing wise. And at Amazon, I was creative with finance. I remember pursuing some innovative financing structures for the company because Amazon was a terrible credit at that point in time. So nobody would lend money. We had to have a letter of credit for everything. We had to have a security deposit for everything. So I negotiated some really interesting structures that would allow all kinds of financial covenants to fall away based on the market cap of the company growing. So I was able to do things like that. And then ultimately I got promoted into International Chief Financial Officer, where I was able to do some incredibly creative things with the head of International. But that helped ultimately Amazon not go bankrupt, avoid bankruptcy, because it was heading towards the end of my time at Amazon. It was really heading for bankruptcy. We instituted a lot of financial discipline in International that actually helped the company really turn around and ultimately became part of a template for how Amazon became profitable. International was actually the first part of the company that was profitable. And I was there when it happened. And you also became case law. And you then went to go to eBay. So how did you end up at eBay? And then I wanted so much to just move back to California. I wanted to be living where there was better weather, where you could go out in December and January and, walk in shorts and things like that. So I looked for all kinds of jobs, and I ultimately got hired to be vice president of finance at eBay. And it was based in San Jose, but I could live in, Northern California, which has got better weather than Seattle. And you worked on the PayPal acquisition? Yes, I did. You've been like Zelig. You're standing at the right point at the right time as things have been happening across a lot of these spaces. Yes. I was at a lot of really interesting places at big growth points in their history. And of course, the thing about internet jobs is they do take a piece of your soul, because they do take over your whole life, and you don't have a person, you can't, it's hard to have a relationship, and you really can't, if you have children, you may not see them, you may not be able to go to their soccer games or, or whatever. And, you don't get weekends, you work on every holiday. It's we used to call it dog years, working 1 year at an internet company is like 7 years at any other company. But I learned a lot. As much about what to do as what not to do. I mean, I think a lot of my learning from the internet years was what to not do. Whereas when I was at Disney, I learned a lot what to do and how
So then,
best practices.
Chris, you then say, I'm going to learn all this. I'm going to learn what not to do, and then I'm going to go into mortgage capital and take a company public.
Yes, so that was funny because I left eBay, and I was going to literally take a year off and just my relationship had ended. I had a relationship which Amazon pretty much killed, and then eBay put the finishing touches on it. And so I was going to take a year off and travel the world and put everything in storage. So I bought a condominium in San Francisco and I put everything in there. And I was just starting to look at where I would go. And this company called me and said, we're a REIT, we're a real estate investment trust. We're private now, but we have to go public within 6 months. We need a CFO to take us public. Would you want to do it? And as you know, in the finance world, taking a company public is the crowning achievement of a finance career. And it was guaranteed IPO because they had promised their investors they'd be public within 6 months, which is really kind of a crazy thing to promise your investors, but they had done it. So I knew it would be public within 6 months. It was in mortgages, which I didn't really know much about, but I thought, I can learn a new thing. It can't be that hard. And it was in San Francisco. So it was really, 2 BART stops away from my condo. And I thought, I'm going to do it. And so I put my year of travel off, and I went and I did it. And I ended up staying there for 5 years. We went public. We grew to a $9 billion REIT. It was really big. And then when the credit crisis approached, it started, REIT financing got very sketchy. And the CEO made a decision to move everybody to Philadelphia, which is where most of the employees were. And I was not going to move to Philadelphia because I had already learned my weather lesson from Seattle. And I was not going. And so I left at the end of 2007, which interestingly happened to segue perfectly with starting my current company, because one of my former CEOs I had worked with had retired and was looking for someone to help his family. And that's what ultimately grew into my current company, Mosaic.
But I thought you were going to take a year off then too. I remember at that time you said, I'm gonna maybe retire. I'm gonna take time off. Did you take any time off?
No, I really didn't. I didn't take any time off between Disney and Amazon. I didn't take any time off really between Amazon and eBay, other than the 3-month lawsuit we had. But I was still reading and researching. I didn't take any time off really after eBay, other than to move to this condo, and then after my REIT. I mean, even as it was winding down, I remember starting my current company while it was winding down. I would work on it at nights and on weekends. And it literally, my last day at my REIT was December 31st of 2007. And my first day was January 1st on my new company. So I never did get to take that year off. No, I never did.
Because that's been one of my memories of you is I'm planning to take time off. I'm planning to sell my company. I'm planning. Mm-hmm. And each time it's been but I'm going to move to the next thing. So you've told a story of now stepping into several different companies where you didn't know or had to learn. How did one start from scratch an investment company in the chaos of early 2018?
You mean 8?
Or 2008.
2008. Yeah. I mean, it's just... I think one of my secret weapons is that I'm really good at figuring things out. Like, I don't know the answer to everything. I don't ever try to, but if I need to know something, I can figure it out. And that goes for, writing a prospectus or writing a 10K or a 10Q or doing the earnings press release or, figuring out how to deal with investment bankers and get the money in the door and, doing a roadshow for taking a company public, which is, an insane piece, bunch of work you do. And I'm not afraid to dive into an area that I don't know and really just roll around and get muddy and figure it out. And I actually really enjoy it. I mean, for me, that's the tactical way that I learn is to be doing it and to having and it's a lot of, there's a lot of fun for me in that.
And there's a lot of storytelling. Because I would say, I know that you and I talked a while ago about that some of your current job is actually storytelling about what's happening in the world and sense making of it to families who have the need to feel safe and feel that they're doing the right thing and not having to be the expert that you and your team become.
That's right. I mean, I think what I do now draws upon all of my experience and all of my education. And I think having been an English literature major and knowing how to communicate as well as I do, I can take a very complicated financial topic and really distill it into words or slides that can really speak to someone who didn't take an MBA, didn't get an MBA. And that's what I do every day. I mean, I'm talking to clients about, here's why we want to be in these types of investments in this period. Here are the risks of them. Here's why you should worry, should not worry, whatever. And then also just being able to, combining just the empathy and the psychology of an investor, because half of investing is psychology, and you have to understand the person and their personality and what's their worldview and what bad experiences have they had with investments prior to meeting you, and how can you get them to make the right decision and also do it in a way that doesn't threaten them or make them get mad at you. Every person is a different way that they process information, and I think that because of these jobs that I've had, where I really, from my very first job, I was speaking to senior executives. I was presenting at board committees. I've been in board meetings. I've been, torn apart in board meetings. I understood, I think one of the things that I do better than many is to actually present something in a really succinct way that is understandable.
And you interweave money with innovation in some interesting ways, so that you have helped the magic of money storytelling behind innovative companies. And now you're doing the same thing for innovative families who in many ways have created their value from being innovative and creative. And you're bringing the money storytelling to it, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yes. And I finally, after all these years, I finally realized that life was never going to slow down for me, really. I'm 58 years old now. And I wrote the book in 2017 and early 2018. And I just realized that I was terrified to write it. I didn't know if I would remember what had happened in any great detail. I was terrified of the disclosures that I'd be making in this book, which I've now made peace with. But life was never going to be calm for me. It just never has been. Not since the day I got out of business school. And I just made the time to finally write something. The irony is that when I was young, I always thought I would write comedy. That's really what I do. I think I do best. And this book is about the furthest thing from comedy that you could imagine, because it's dealing with death and dying, and all of my friends around me dying, and my parents rejecting me, and our friends rejecting us, and fighting with doctors and insurance companies and other parents, and trying to build a career and not die myself in the process, and then coming out on the other end and having a really happy and pretty. I'm so amazed when I think about the life that I've led. It's kind of amazing on so many different levels. But I finally got the courage and made the time to write a book. And I was very surprised how it all came out and the things that jumped out on the page.
And the people around in it. So you have people in this book, but you even on your cover, here is, Michael Eisner, Peter Chern, and Lawrence Gordon, and Elaine Wynn, that you've been able to then interweave your story with relationships of value and support, which is really cool. So, Chris, as we get toward the end of this, and people get Chris's book, and we'll have stuff in the show notes about the book, but what's your next phase? You have yet to take that year off you keep talking about. Is there a creative journey? Is there another book in the mix? I know you love to travel. This has been a crap travel year, of course, and that you still, I think, are doing what you can on the personal exercise and other great stuff of personal and emotional health. What is the next Chris Zyda story?
I don't know yet. I am enjoying the way that this book is unfolding for me. I have had a couple of good reviews so far. I've had a lot of positive reaction from people who've read it. So that's encouraging. It all depends on how much it sells. If it sells and it's a success, either critically or by the number of books it sells, I'm going to certainly be tempted to write something else. I mean, I think it's too early to tell yet, but I'm really cautiously optimistic, and I'm enjoying all the podcasts and the radio interviews and the TV interviews that I've been doing about it. And I'm certainly open to that. I think that, it's possible that it leads me to pursue finance and writing at the same time. I mean, although that's a lot to do, because I remember how much time it took to write this book and all the discipline it took. But so I don't know. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to take that year off traveling until I'm like fully retired. And I don't know when that's going to be, because life's too much fun.
I don't know if you're ever going to fully retire. Chris, we're near the end of our conversation together. Is there anything else we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention?
No, but if you want to find out more about my book, you can go to my website, which is www.czYda.com, Zyda. And there's information, there's reviews, there's some of the media that I've done is on there, and you can read about my bio more. And I hope you would give it a chance to try reading my book. I think it's a crazy story of the terrible years of the AIDS pandemic that has an uplifting ending, which unfortunately was not always the case for people in that era. So,
well, thank you for joining us. We'll have this information in the show notes, and I'm looking forward to watching your continuing adventures in the world of Chris Zyda.
Thanks, Gigi. It's great to be here. Have a great day.
Well, that's Chris's story. Is that different than your story? Have you had to turn an abrupt right or left at some point in time and figure out how to take your superpowers and add them to something else? Join us at nextcareer.me for classes to think about your own career journey. They're free right now. Plus, we're building other materials, and we'd love to have you in the community. And also take a look at the whole podcast at creativeinnovatorspodcast.com. We'll be having stories from other people. We're going to be changing the podcast out to have once a week drops on Tuesdays that are going to be stories about how to build out a creative, nonlinear career. And Thursdays drop really great episodes from people who have been nonlinear change agents, have taken their careers in unusual directions, and hopefully provide some inspiration for your life.